because we're sharing.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. I apologize for standing all the way back here. We're trying to live stream at the same time in a very large room. So thank you for joining us this evening, spending your time with us. We are here to work on the landscape manual. So my name is Anthony Cataldo, and I'm the Division Chief of Land Development up in DPZ here at Howard County. And my team has been focused on beginning this process of updating the landscape manual. For those of you who don't know, which I imagine most of you do, and for those of you joining us virtually, the landscape manual was last written in 1993 with an amendment in 98, and then a very small update in 2010, which essentially updated some sort of street. So despite all of the advancements that have been made over the last number of years regarding plant types, materials, calculations, our landscape manual is pretty much lagged behind. So it's time for us to start the process, or maybe past time for us to start the process. But we're kicking it off and we're beginning with our landscape update. To do that, Planning and Zoning brought on board a team from Site Resources. They are the consultant team that's going to help us through this process. This is the third focus group of the 3 that we've had scheduled, where we've been eliciting specific information from different user groups so that we can provide Site Resources with sort of really current feedback on the manual from outside users. We have provided them feedback as internal users, and the next step of this process is really for them to aggregate all that information, work through the different pieces, and begin drafting an outline and then new text for the landscape manual. That text will, of course, be available for comment. So we plan to post it to the website, so you'll be able to access it there, where we will post it for a comment period and gather any additional feedback you might have on what's there before we finalize the draft, present it to the planning board, and ultimately the county council for adoption. So we're hoping to do that over the next few months. That's how you fit into the process. Those of you joining us virtually, you'll note that below the live stream is the email address for landscape manual at howardcountynd.gov. That is the collection tool that we are using to gather comments from the public. So if you have comments during this presentation and in order to participate, please send comments to that email address. I have staff members here who are actively monitoring it so that we can share information that you send in with the group here. And for those of you that have already sent comments in, please note that we do have them. We have been collecting them, and then we've been packaging them together in groups and posting them so that our consultant team also has access to them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our consultant team, who's going to walk through an interactive presentation. And then those of you in the room, you'll be able to come up and start participating. And then anyone who joins in virtually, as I mentioned, send emails to that email address, and we can, in real time, give them the consultant team to work into the presentation. With that, I'm going to hand it off to our Site Resources team. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. We're excited to get your feedback, and we're excited and honored to be part of this process. My name is Kevin. I'm a landscape architect and principal Site Resources. We are a company of landscape architects and civil engineers that do design work in Howard County and surrounding counties. Emily Monroe.
Hi, I'm Emily Anderson. I'm a landscape architect designer.
And I'm Rubio, and I'm a landscape architecture and design partner.
Let me share our screen so we get back up. Everyone? So there. So as Anthony mentioned, the landscape manual is getting a little old now, to say the least. So as he mentioned, it was last amended, the document was last amended in '98, and then there was an updated plant list, recommended plant list in 2010. So we are starting this process. For those of you who may not be intimately familiar with the document itself and what its purpose is, the landscape manual is the technical manual used to establish minimum standards of performance for preparing landscape plans. So it's something that professionals like ourselves have to adhere to when we're helping with designing with new developments. Some of the intent behind the content in the manual is to enhance the physical appearance of the county development, buffer potentially incompatible land uses, screen undesirable views, improve the environmental performance of new development by reducing stormwater runoff, air pollution, glare, noise, promote energy conservation, prevent damage to and unnecessary removal of vegetation, and conserve the value of property and neighborhoods. And these are also included in the zoning regulations as they relate to the landscape manual. The landscape manual directs items such as required landscape plantings, the type of perimeter landscape buffers and screening required between adjacent land uses. It directs perimeter and internal landscaping for parking lots and placement of street trees. Applicability. So the landscape plans that have to accompany final plans and site development plans have to adhere to the landscape manual requirements, and the types of development is, kind of covers a lot of things. The different types of subdivisions, residential development, non-residential development, and the Newtown development, like Columbia. So that's just wanted to give you a little bit of background and about what the landscape manual is supposed to do, what its purview is. For tonight, we are, for anyone who's in here tonight, we have sticky notes and pens. So you're going to use those and summarize your thoughts. We have opportunity to expand upon those once people start having an opportunity to get their sticky notes up on the boards. In the following slides, we're going to have a few different categories of questions or prompts to just kind of help you kind of jog your thoughts about what you might want to share your thoughts and suggestions on. And then we'll review those. We can ask for clarity. You're welcome to explain more if you need to expand on your comment. And then certainly if you think of something else, or if you have something in different categories, you can use different sticky notes. The idea is to kind of lay them on one of these boards up here that makes the most sense. We have one that is for anything that we didn't cover or anything outside of what we bring up on the next few slides. As Anthony said, for anyone attending virtually, use that landscape manual at howardcountymd.gov. And we will also be reviewing those as they come in tonight. So one of the what we've seen for sure so far on the comments that have come in through email up to today, when I was looking at it, several comments have been received that include suggestions for including or requiring more native plant species in the manual, as well as updating the plant list to prohibit additional invasive species. So some of these are not comprehensive questions, but some of the examples that we've wanted to bring up with you tonight and get your input on is what resources or references do you suggest in addition to those already submitted? And those are some of the 3 that we've seen some repeats on. What plants should be added to the recommended plant list, especially if there's particular ones. How important is it that the plants, native and non-native, that are required, how important is it that they are sourced locally? So we're going to run through all of these and then let everyone comment on all of the different kind of categories. And then, so you guys can chime in if you want. But so some of the things that the landscape manual talks about that we mentioned earlier are plant buffers, landscape buffers between different uses, whether it's buffering parking lots from views or residential from commercial. And some of the ones on the left side are some of the more traditionally planted scenarios.
Yeah, I think some of the themes, some of these images is sort of maybe what the current manual has resulted in, and things have obviously changed in the world since then. There are new challenges and new issues and new opportunities. This is showing, how an opaque screen can be installed per the original manual. That creates some challenges with visibility and security and places for people to hide. And it's a monoculture and it may not be helping ecologically in any way. There may be opportunities for pollinator plantings to be incorporated into these buffers. So some of these images just to sort of spark conversation.
Or some instances where a buffer may be required that is buffering, open space or a more compatible land use. And maybe there's an opportunity to do something other than the traditional buffering when it's not really needed because that land is not going to be, the intent is that the land won't be developed as an incompatible land use. Next kind of category, overarching category is observation. So you guys live in the county and drive all around the county. I'm sure you have thoughts about what you want to see more of or less of. And then particularly we'd like to hear any examples that you have of that you can point to of nicely landscaped areas to serve as a guidance moving forward, or poorly landscaped areas for lessons learned, like let's not do it this way. Different kind of categories under that heading would be street tree plantings or rain gardens, open space areas, buffer areas between residential and non-residential uses. Successful examples and less than desirable examples. Going the wrong way. There we go. So some of these scenarios might be street tree plantings or plantings along streetscapes. So that upper left-hand corner is an example of something that the landscape manual, it would address as it's currently written. The one below it on the left, it gets a little bit closer in terms of you can see that there's a landscape buffer between the curb and the pedestrian sidewalk area. And then there's also kind of the progression of increasing the amount of plantings and landscape areas as part of those streetscapes. Going back to what Kevin had mentioned earlier about there's also the potential for, something maybe being too screened in that lower right-hand corner for in terms of visibility for businesses to know whether or not there's a particular sign there for a business that you're looking for.
Some of the challenges may be that if something is the manual or a manual or is too prescriptive, you end up with one type of approach that might work in some scenarios but not work in other scenarios. So, for example, in a residential area, you may want a lot of shade, a lot of screening. In a commercial setting, you may not want that. You may want something that softens the edge but still allows visibility to businesses. So opportunities to consider different approaches to the same idea, street trees in this example.
Another category that we need to address on all development projects is stormwater management. The top left-hand corner is what was traditionally done many years ago. It's just a detention pond. You can see in the back, there is some screening. There's a multifamily housing behind that. But otherwise, just lawn area. To the right, the top right is more of what we are encountering now and what's required or planted in microenvironmental retention facilities. But then also the idea that while the landscape manual does not manage what's planted in these facilities, but they can work with it. And just the idea that parking lots, maybe it's not a landscape island with trees in it, maybe it's stormwater management gets used there. Right now, their stormwater management can't have trees planted in it in some jurisdictions because of the underdrain piping and that kind of thing. There's conflicts with the roots, so trees may not be able to be part of that equation in a parking lot, but that's certainly nicer than something that just becomes a big mulch bed. Another category that has a board up here for comments is opportunities. So what potential missed opportunities do you see? Do you have any thoughts on ways to balance conflicting goals, such as landscape trees and parking lots versus solar panels? That's something that the landscape manual doesn't address and that we're starting to see more and more of. Screening requirements for non-residential uses and parking lots versus visibility for business owners. Like we mentioned earlier, screening versus visibility for safety in any situation. So there's some images to get you thinking about a situation that's not addressed at all right now, taking, open areas or farmland that, and converting them to solar fields, or using solar panels over parking areas, which in and of themselves provide shade, but if we added trees into that, eventually there's a chance that they would shade out, that shade out the solar panels themselves.
This being a great example of something that is a real world scenario that we all know is out there, but the landscape manual doesn't even inform folks as to how to manage these kinds of things and what plants should go on with these kinds of things. So it's definitely on the list of things to study moving forward.
And then even within those fields, screening or buffering the field areas from adjacent uses, that could be a conflict as well. But maybe instead of lawn area, there could be pollinator plantings or meadow plantings that get managed instead of traditional turf grasses. Same thing with just kind of thinking about our parking lot areas a little bit more. The landscape manual does address the top left hand picture currently by requiring landscape islands and trees, like in the bottom left hand, but maybe there's opportunity to bring in some new types of plantings as well to support pollinators and that kind of thing. So there's just, these are just some opportunities that we see and see coming through on the comments so far that we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on and expand upon them. And then, like I said before, any other thoughts? So if there's anything that we haven't brought up already, any other topics that are important to you to address and bring up tonight, please feel free to share those as well. And so that will be on that far right board. So they're in order of the way that we went over them in the presentation. Plant list, items, observations, opportunities, and then any other thoughts. So if there's anything else, I'd invite everyone to come on up, and then everyone online, remember to use that email address for providing comments. We've got sticky notes. There's no significance with the colors, just we had two different sets of colors. So you can come up and got pens here, and we'd love to hear your comments.
Come up, feel free to read one or more of your thoughts out loud, and the goal is for this to be a little bit of a dialogue and conversation.
We have images as well, and if you'd like to take a look at them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Project copy.
No, we do. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. But yeah.
Any of us hadn't seen it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was excited to see that when I am lead accredited professional and landscape architect. After going through that, it's like it's all mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering issues, and it was very cool to see that come out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yes, sir. I agree.
It's a budget. Going to a couple of months for that. Really looking forward to having y'all get us updated. Great mind, think alike.
Well, is there any negative advisors? Yeah.
Is that a legitimate?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm also going to put this, if you haven't signed in, the sign-in sheet, I just brought it up here.
really?
Remind us to do that. I just put it right here though. for you.
And then we'll- and
You can manual support. I'm just curious if we're looking at rewriting.
Well,
Rewriting
Little
part.
plastic in your book.
I've
Yeah,
been hearing a
when
lot of
you
that.
go to write it, you write it.
Nitty gritty really doesn't necessarily
Right.
affect the goals as stated
Yeah.
in 1994, whatever.
Right. The zoning regulations
Try to get to-
then,
Right.
and that first list of intents that were on the first slide, seeing the verbatim from.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, you-
Right.
Right. that's right.
And the landscape manual has its own section as well, it's kind of echo one another.
Yeah, that's very similar.
Very similar.
And it's relatively, from my view, relatively, I mean, the directions are on process way.
Yeah,
So
Yep.
this is my, like, what the occasion of any, like, say, well, you should. We can argue that whether it supports or doesn't support my.
right, right.
Great point. I don't know where that.
Yeah, that.
One of-
Okay, grab yours at your head.
Might be harder. Unless there's a-
Yeah. What's your? Yeah. List of. Everybody knows what's going to do different. There's a lot, I'll say, there's a half dozen native plants that are excluded. Yeah. From the list. So excluded because it's not.
Maintenance issues, maybe.
Conservation, but yeah. It's a challenge. It is, it's not. And I think it's one size doesn't fit all. I think you're right. It's like a black and white. If it's that sort of gray, what I look for. Yeah. That's a change. Yeah, it's interesting. And then you take a look at the videos, it's basics, have a lot of native on the property, and they're extremely invasive. Like the coffee tree that's taking over the whole area. And that's interesting. Sure. Yeah.
What am I? Yeah.
And then. Which might reflect what it looks like. A lot of it's an area.
Yeah.
There'd be. Part of the name. Why people love it. But yeah, it's an example of how to bring it. Right. Well, it's looking to do. Parking improvements around the state. Okay. We have about 6 of those.
Sent to me.
Yeah, the town
Yeah.
with,
It's the whole thing. It's on the whole tool. What we have to make part. It's, you know, that's something that I learned about. What we've done is put in this purple. Okay. We have to put in some. Short, it's on the story. Yeah. I mean, it's not, all of it. As we grow, one of them get that shaded out. And some things goes from this. I didn't find it. It's just, I mean, we're 20 years. Yeah, we'll get some of that. But here's what I'm just going to read about it.
well, I would intend is to preserve the Grant Farm to
There's not.
regular vegetation.
How many more?
Ultimately, this happened like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just very, yeah, and then, you know, that's sort of the thing here, like we say. You and I both know, wait, I need another house. Yeah, where do I put it? Okay, just throw it in there, there's some numbers. We can now,
Yeah.
and the reviewer will look at it and, no, we have all the things.
Yeah. All fantastic.
It's really, parking lot is,
Yeah. A couple of my arguments, I'll confess. Yeah. So, well, the other one, we have. Backwards and back. That's like dandelions, like those things are running all over.
Okay, let's write down.
But they're
I'll help us remember this. The positive.
I think it's much more.
And the one we do all space, maybe.
Any other?
Yeah, sure.
But that's 3.5 feet.
But anyway, back to the McDonald's project that you're working on. Yeah, I hear you.
This process, how you can be interaction with the streets.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Some of the other comments.
Are you doing the side?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
sorry.
Call these problems and others. It's all harm prevention requirements. So, yeah, so it's like, we've had meetings with schools and.
Are good examples too. Positive examples are great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great job.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Like everybody walked in.
Sorry, we couldn't move these tables. These are bolted down.
You know, one of these, I think. I live in Florida. But we have Japanese. So glad that I heard you are assuming that they would reach certain diameter. Well, they never did. But it's still not gonna happen, but they can walk.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably gonna be on the second.
Okay. That's exactly the whole. Yeah. Right. Because we're thinking,
Yeah, I mean, that's when you get that way of looking up and it looks like. Something that, you know, take it out, 50%, and you go, well, this week is ugly, so here we go.
yeah.
know what to read.
Yeah, so.
I don't know. It must be going.
I think of, hey, spelling doesn't count. Yeah. In this subject.
Yeah. Because it's so good. I call myself one right now. It's like, I don't think. We can still think.
Why would? Here those utility funds. Yeah. Definitely plant.
As long as it's on short.
Well, I think. It's, yeah. Yeah. But I think it's.
Yeah, you're not asking, you're not, what you said,
Exactly, that's the thing. Maintenance eventually. But I think these guys have nothing. Right, that's utility. Right, but still, that's a great idea. I started doing it. I mean,
right, right.
what's it called? I told her.
They're very focused on sort of their perspective. Like the ones that have folks together. So here's a whole lot of different ideas from.
Fencing under.
Tripod.
Yes.
Stupid boys, too.
That's their. Yes.
Yeah. It was a fun.
They're open
The wildlife part.
all of the.
Exactly.
All of the work.
Yeah, I don't like it, but that's the thing, and all of a sudden it comes to. I go.
Was it covered?
Yeah, that way people know what.
Right.
So, the landscape manual applies to the segment. So if
Yeah.
it's subdivision, that's posts. So numbers, it's an individual person looking to subdivide their property. And those who are.
Never know.
Design cycle. So again, that has a broad reaching effect. One individual,
Always.
it's residential as well.
No, I mean. Company. That is.
Not necessarily, like a homeowner will contract with an engineer to sort of help with this process. The drawings themselves need to be done by the.
Sorry, she means somebody just build
If they own the lot and they're subdividing their real properties, then they'll be.
Well, I'm gonna build a house. So that. Small. But if it's one person, their yard. Correct.
There you go.
And it's not a fight.
Does
Don't know.
If it's guideline applied. So if you have to apply to. Yeah. But only as it relates to that. So, yes. Right. It's only for that.
The track manual says there's some sort of it's a small minor thing. They don't have the. Yeah.
Well, they printed it.
About this, there's like an expansion of 4 minutes, and they have.
There's like, you should. Horrible places, let's face it. They're on that. You don't have, you have heat islands, you have all kinds of things that, you know, people want to stop living there. Suffering. Energy bills, all this stuff, so are the guidelines intended to apply to all those things?
They don't generally retroactively go back in time.
So, is there any effort to do something like that within the county?
So there are. We're just the opposite. Increase for all of them. So their treatment goals in general, identifying opportunities to begin beyond those. We partner with them in as much as we design plans together with the role that we have for subdivision and development. So sort of outside of that, right, on the private side, there are other agencies that we want to be able to affect positive change.
Right. Utilize whatever work that really hard here to support somewhat different.
The climate action plan, a lot of information about what they'd like to do. And in many instances, identify the landscape management as one of the tools to get affecting that change. And there's certainly pivoting that from using some of those pieces of this to say, hey, we have program that we're going to identify. So that's part, it's also part of the yes. Yep, Office of Community Sustainability. Give them the plan. Who's he was giving that word. Who's kind of DPW. It was kind of two, so we're part of it. Here, there. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, yeah. We're trying to break down this. And then we're here, as everyone's here. Items going on, we're trying to communicate. We'll be fine. It'll be perfect. Very good. And we're trying to serve each other. Not every, I'm sure. But at least we do. Like, yeah, everyone out.
You get funding. Yeah, or just. Right. Some of it you have. I say. Yeah.
Identified the staff that because we're currently have manual department and we have our factors. Perhaps, but since it's tied to the development process, that's where we're looking at it. So far. Enforcement is done through. Right, right. So we fund security as part of the process. And then. Well, they create a report, pass it out, bond for the local. And if it fell, and then the. Right, so, right. Yeah, so that's where it really comes in for when currently don't have a building.
Yeah.
Right. Right, right. Which we have done, I think, anecdotal. It's like the wrong place, the wrong way, you might have. This is just, if you have. The long.
So what, yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, anyway, that's the thing that kind of changed. Finding money. And, I don't know, we need. Getting well over. Oh, wow. Very cool. All of that. Yeah. All the wood.
Yeah, it's very well.
Looking for less, right, what is provided.
Right, yeah, yeah. And we have alternative suppliers, but again, I think that was this very mandatory. And it's been implemented in that same way, right? Yeah. It's like this refresh opportunity to provide not only. It's like for but which I think we also yeah. Yeah. Well, we researched on the development community. Links to other jurisdictions they work in that they like certain aspects of, or like certain parts of the process better, able to Really try to.
The other provider could reflect that. Nobody really knew. Right. Chinese. From a big picture,
Yeah, yeah. Which is still a little bit apart, but
you know, parking would go.
right. Yep. Thank you for all your feedback.
So we have, we got our time check over here and we didn't realize we were getting close to the end of our hour. So we wanted to kind of skim through some of these, and a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory the way that they were written, but there might be a few that we would like to hear some clarification on, or just a little bit of like a couple extra sentences. Got it. I've seen one already. Do you want to start with? Yeah.
Stormwater curb drain on Whiteacre. Okay. Oh, gotcha. Awesome. That's an example of something to take a look.
Very successful.
Okay, cool.
The path to the pedestrian bridge over 29 is flooded out. Doesn't anymore.
Okay.
But it's still the
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Reston, Virginia has some dense areas, plantings along some of their paths thicker than most areas in Columbia. Oh, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Reston, Virginia has nice dense areas, plantings along some of their paths thicker than most areas in Columbia. Could you expand on which area in Reston, Virginia are you thinking? That's yours.
I'm not sure if it's that different, I just coming out of that.
Okay, so it's a little bit more of buffering, a little bit more of like wooded. See, a little bit more layering. Okay, thank you.
So I think this one talks about the diversity of call it a micro ecosystem. So plant trees with shrubs and ground cover and leave the leaves. That shines a light on something that I think is important. Like the main road yeah, after something goes in, what happens for the rest of its life? That has a huge impact on the success of that. And part of it is changing the way that we or the society thinks about these kinds of things. So fantastic point. Plant lists. There is almost always a native plant that can serve the purpose of a non-native plant. In any case, there should never be any planting of invasive plant. Fantastic point. I think question to that, some of the challenges we have, we're enormous fans as designers of native plants. Sometimes putting native plants in a non-native setting, a parking lot, for example. No one loves a parking lot unless you need to park in it, but they exist. And part of our job outside of this effort as designers is to find plant material that can survive in that parking lot. Sometimes that's native plants. Sometimes, at least on a ground plane level, that becomes challenging because a lot of our native understory plants are not designed to sit out in a sunny parking lot. Any thoughts on success for that? Hmm.
That existed long before we came over that arguments and, you know, the almost justified conditions. So it's just not a finding.
That's true. Yeah, I agree. And prairie plants, meadow plantings, I think the challenges that we've had is when woody plants are required in those settings, or requested in those settings. And in the spirit of diversity, if we want multiple layers of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Also the way you plant it, how you prepare the soil, how you avoid the compaction around it, how you mulch it, no volcano.
Yep.
All these things can make a tree a happy home.
Yeah.
Okay, there. But so often we just try and dig a hole, stick it in it, get enough rain.
Yeah.
So you know that's not what we're at.
Yeah.
Even with tree planting, something. It's all.
And they've got to make it last for a year, otherwise they have to replace it. Maybe that's gonna be something on the man.
It's longer than that year.
Down the road or something.
Yeah, I think that it's a challenge to keep a tree alive beyond that year. It's not too terrible to do it for a year, especially if you're watering it every day. Part of the other challenge that doesn't necessarily apply to this manual, at least at the moment, is conservation of existing trees. There have been comments about providing credits for, instead of cutting down all the trees and then planting a bunch of great trees, can someone get credit for the requirements in this manual by preserving larger trees? And the challenge with that is we've seen on several projects that the impacts to those trees don't show up until long after anyone is liable for that. I've done it myself in my own yard. We built our new house. We tried to save this one maple tree, and it survived. It's still alive, and it's been 20 years, but it is slowly on its way out. But yeah, great points. Thank you.
I've seen several comments about checking out the Arlington County, Virginia tree lists or plants lists here tonight, and then also in some email comments. Is there something in particular about that list or their resources that if someone could explain like why this keeps coming up, that would be good. Yeah.
So the list is all native in the purpose of that. Developmental and trees, they looked at all of them, how much space they need, how big they want to tolerate, all that. It doesn't have to work. So,
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I've seen it listed like check this out. I haven't had a chance to yet, so I wanted to know what was.
Thank you.
As well. Include ground covers and grasses. So some of the other focus groups that topic came up. So at the moment there are shade trees, flowering trees, evergreen trees, and shrubs. Then there would be credit that equals those in an appropriate setting that provides pollinator planting with perennials or ground cover or grasses or things of that nature. So that, again, good to see that coming again.
This comment is says, provide shade to pedestrians, cyclists, people utilizing mass transit, like bus stops. I think that's a great point. I think sometimes the development can lean a little bit more towards vehicles and sometimes pedestrians and cyclists end up, being around. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Something else, something else, inside, surviving, things are both down. The interest in the size of human.
Yeah, it's great. It's something we've done on several projects with the I'm drawing a blank on the name, the Silva Cell system. So we do a fair amount of work in downtown Baltimore And a tree pit that you see that's, 8 feet by 4 feet is not
That's the minimum of that.
enough to keep a tree alive. It'll keep it alive for that year or 2 years, but eventually it'll never thrive. The Silva-cell system provides structural support under the sidewalk that allows root growth into proper planting media under the sidewalk. So it's a great solution.
Local tree club.
It's an expensive solution, but it's a great solution.
Yes.
Back to the volcano, if you only have land be able to not do that, you could probably, pull the land on these trees. So kind of happy that we ended the land.
The landscape and animals.
Yeah.
Talking about maintenance.
Well, I think there can be, it can be part of the detailing, their planting details. If they end up being part of the manual, the final manual, they can be modified to specifically instruct. I wouldn't necessarily think we put no volcanoes, but I bet if we did, everyone put a plant in would understand.
Oh, wait. So, let's go.
Yes. Like, very kind of feel bad that people, it's more of a big use of going to locally, to a business.
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's a balance depending on the site, depending on the job. There are a lot of projects where an owner might want more instant gratification, and that might be driven by, for private development, that might be driven by funding for that project. Someone wants this thing to look fantastic at the ribbon cutting. That challenges that idea. Other challenges that we've had involve deer. So even deer-resistant plants at a certain small size will get devoured anyway. And we've done install projects where just the deer-resistant tag was all that was flapping in the wind in the morning. But it's true. It's a good point that if you let something establish, it's a balance. That's a good point.
Thank you. Getting back to the point on mulch, and just ones, please. Observe the pollinators, the best thing to do is not mulch. But green covers, kind of the truth. So the mowers then always suppose. But you can project more than 6 line of that is going to be at the base. And put maybe green cover there in advance and make it part of the plan. So that it can match pollinators that later eggs on leaf when that falls and larvae is overwintering and has a safe place. So that there is no pollinators. And and so can I just combine that with what you just said? That we can we'll concern about like pollinators. And really beautiful, growing a garden with a little tree in it. It's actually going to get to be a big, beautiful tree, but at least you'll have the
It's down on the pedestrian folk trail.
Right? It's a good true.
People might not walk to the sidewalk.
You're part of it.
Yeah, we've done sort of like the grill landscaping. Landscaping company. Not in what I'll go to. We ended up landscaping drip line mulch. We stick out of it. Got the one, but then the next year, kind of made one. Ultimately, realized. So slowly and surely, the whole property is getting, 20, 30 foot long. Start underneath, That's something that, you know, pretty good. Landed at the rated garden.
But I think in a commercial setting, the biggest impact is the mow. And for a long time ago, we decided why are we putting stakes? If the tree's planted the right way, it doesn't need to be staked to keep it from blowing down the breeze. But we left the stakes on there to keep the mower from girdling the tree. So that's our details show stakes today for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, my problem is here, because I end up spending your public things developing this data, and here I'm gonna be the student challenge to start planning the more basic. So are you gonna work with the rest of the county at all to advocate for the event? They have a whole lot of money. To not have to keep on doing that.
Excellent point. We're just considering working with our partner agencies on managing recreational parks and does the peer management program. And they certainly will have working with, but and we'll work. It's an excellent point for us to consider. We'll continue the dialogue.
Anything else anyone wanted to add? Yep.
Those who have planted mildew,
So our design, sorry.
Yeah, go for
So the Department of Public Works is currently working on updates to their design manuals. We were in a discussion today where someone began talking about the pros and cons and the practical implications of Kirby service that they've been seeing over the last couple of years. So I was speaking with somebody, I believe, about the multiple different manuals and pieces that are all being updated at the exact same time. And so we are in, some of my team is participating in those teams and those reviews. So we're trying to communicate the best we can so we can coordinate on issues like that. So it's certainly something we need to look into.
So I have a question about, whether or not we're going to do these to consider climate change. Maybe, because it's not just warming, it's less cold, and it's
The climate weirding.
weirding. And that can change periods of long periods of drought and flooding. And all. So is there an effort to put some species to encourage people to look at so that the plant? Yeah. But at the same time, this is not bad.
jump back to the pavement. Raise recommend the asphalt pavement. It's a renewable resource. That is required here is my favorite, it's concrete. Goes to be massively replaced. The asphalt replaceable. Also the pervious asphalt will stand being salted. Concrete sidewalk can't take salt at all.
Some evidence that, more than some evidence that asphalt melts in the heat.
Yep.
So there's a downside.
The mix in the oyster shells.
You mentioned that there are a lot of manuals being updated at the same time. So is this, the line with the sign manual to ensure that all of the pathways and sidewalks and
Yep. So Complete Streets has been adopted by policy policy in the design manuals. It's on track to be a lot of overlapping pieces. It's on track to be modified in the subdivision regulations to fully coordinate. Part of the design manual updates that are going on now are also looking at the streets legislation to make sure that they're fully compatible. So yes, is the short answer. It's weaving its way through all the different components. The landscape manual, not only did we want it updated because practically it's outdated, it was also identified in the climate action plan in a number of locations for updating to begin to implement some of those strategies, as well as a general plan, which updates to the different manuals to take into consideration the forward pieces of that one. So yes, is also the long answer for all the different pieces. Yeah, so lots of different moving parts and pieces, and we are trying to coordinate and communicate with one another so that we're not at the end of next year or two having disparate manuals to say different.
We have part of it, however, they call it, have a normal photo. I don't have to use photo. So these two things, obviously, they're already rules. Not be required.
Yeah.
Some of the what regulates plantings within stormwater management facilities that are regulated by the county, which have to answer to the state regulations for stormwater. MDE has their own list of recommended plants, and they are definitely there on it.
Yeah, some of them don't work.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing is that needs to be coordinated because one side of the county does one thing, the other side of the county.
We're going to continue to do our best. With that, I want to thank you all for coming out and spending your time with us, and those online who have been sharing comments, and just reiterate that if you have additional information as you leave this meeting, you think, oh, I forgot, oh, I want to mention, please send those comments to landscape manual at howardcountymd.gov. That's the email address that we have been collecting all the comments with. We are happy to accept as many comments as we can get to begin to sort of start this project sort of in real time, sifting through, or have you guys start sifting through all the different comments that we've received, begin qualifying them as we begin to draft the agenda of the new manual and then the text for that with the outline. But thank you again for spending your time with us, for producing this many comments. It's really been wonderful. So I really appreciate your input. Closing thought.
I would like to make comments about native non-native invasive. I guess that you guys can probably pick up all the invasive. But there are plants on that list that are not currently listed as invasive, but many of us are in areas, and we've all spent a lot of time pulling up the COVID from open space and identifying them. In some areas, it's so take the whole off. Andy, you're
Culture and one of our leaders. I think that when you go with Gotoma is on good because but I'm pretty
Last comment.
I just want to thank you all for doing this work. I think it's really valuable and very fun.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for coming in. And send any emails, any last minute comments to those emails.